Hey everybody, how are you guys? I'm hoping you're excited to do our next meal prep here. So we've got some really good ones today. So let's just go ahead and dive right in, marking our bags. So you need 5 bags unless you're prepping something to cook right away. I got my a cast iron pan out. I'm going to be prepping the one of the recipes directly into the pan so that I can cook it for lunches this week. But anyway, so we're going to start with our Jamaican jerk chicken. And make sure you date your bags. So today is the 3rd. And then we got a chili lime shrimp. And then we're going to do the Italian shredded beef. And then we've got the honey balsamic chicken and veggies, which I am not going to prep. I'm going to prep that into the pan, not the bag. So a honey balsamic chicken and veggies. And then our last recipe is our lemon basil pork chops, which I actually have in a bag in my fridge because I bought the pork chops in bulk and separated them already. So once you go ahead and mark your bags, get all your ingredients together, we're going to start with our jerk chicken. So grab your bag for your jerk chicken. And let me adjust this so you guys can see what I'm doing just a little bit better. There you go. Hopefully that works. All right. So I like to fold the edges down and open up the bag so that you guys can see a little bit better. And hold on, adjust this one more time. Sorry. So you guys can see more of what is going on in my space here. All right. So for the chicken, you're going to need about 2 pounds, give or take, chicken breast. And what I like to do is slice them lengthwise and then slice them in half. So you get 4 smaller chunks from each breast. And then they cook a little bit faster if you're cooking them in the oven. And you don't get as much uneven cooking or a lot of dry spots and a lot of raw spots. So let's grab our chicken. And I also like to have 2 separate cutting boards, a plastic one for meats and then a wooden one for veggies. That way you don't have to worry about cross-contamination from your meats and your veggies. So what we're going to do is just slice lengthwise, like I said. And you don't have to do this if you don't want to. It's just a preference for mine. All right, and then we're going to cut it in half, toss it in the bag. And then the same thing with our second one, because I'm doing 2. So cut it in half. There's a big chunk of fat and nastiness there. We're just going to cut that off and toss to the side. So cutting it in half. So this is going to be 8 very generous servings of chicken. My kids don't eat nearly this much, so we will definitely be eating this for a couple of days. So there we go. So we got all our chicken in our bag. And then I'm just going to rinse my cutting board real quick and switch to my veggie board. All right. So we actually don't have any slicing and dicing in this one. But you're going to want your veggie board for the next recipe. So we're going to set that aside there. Pull out our veggie cutting board, and then I'm just going to put the rest of the chicken back in the fridge until our last recipe. All right, so now we got to get all our spices together. A lot of spices going into this one. We're going to mix everything right on top of the chicken. That way you don't have any mess to clean up later. We'll give it all a good shake to mix it in a little bit. So we got half a teaspoon of thyme, if you're doing the regular size recipe. And then we need half a teaspoon of allspice. And then we're gonna go, it says a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna do half a teaspoon. That's a pretty light on the salt. And you want that salt to bring out the flavor without being too salty. So then we got a 1/4 teaspoon, of black pepper. Now remember, use your best judgment. There is black pepper and cayenne pepper in this recipe. So it can be a little over spicy for some people, especially for little ones. So use your best judgment. If you need to leave out some of the pepper, that's totally fine. Then we're going to do a teaspoon of garlic powder. And then we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Then we're going to do 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne. Again, use your best judgment on the hot stuff. Whoops, cayenne just went everywhere. And then we are going to do 1 tablespoon each of olive oil, lime juice, and honey. All right, so first, this is a new bottle of olive oil. You gotta pull the little tab out. All right, so tablespoon of olive oil. And I'm gonna do the honey next because I have it here. Tablespoon of honey. I am actually using a store-bought honey today. We have to press a couple of frames of honey actually right now. We're running a little low, so we've got a couple of frames of honey from our bees stored in the garage, but we haven't had a chance to press it yet. So, all right, and then we're gonna add a tablespoon of lime juice, which will be about 1/2 a lime. And I have a citrus press here that I'm just gonna use to juice it right into the bag. All right, there we go. So that's it for this recipe. We're gonna give it a really good shake to make sure that those spices get all over. So kind of massage your bag a little bit. Oops. All right, and then we're just gonna press the air out of it and flatten it. I'll move this stuff so you can see a little bit better. So kind of flatten everything out. Slicing the chicken really helps with the freezing process too, because then everything fits a little bit better in your bag. So I always freeze all of mine flat, just like that. So I'm gonna pop this in the fridge, and then we're gonna move on to our shrimp. All right, so next recipe is chili lime shrimp. So I've got a 16-ounce bag of shrimp here. We're gonna start with our veggies. So we're gonna do 3 peppers and an onion first. All right, so we're gonna grab our first pepper. It's a really big one. And I gotta grab my handy little compost bucket. We have this countertop compost bucket that we use in the house for fruits and veggie scraps. So that, and then the kids take it down to our big compost pile, usually once a day. It's nice then because we can compost everything for our garden. It doesn't go to waste. All that jazz. All right, so we got 1 pepper. Ooh, forgot to take the sticker off that one. So we're doing 3 of these, and you can just, I recommend just slicing these. You don't want to dice them. And then that way everything cooks a little bit more evenly. Because this one you definitely cannot emphasize enough, want to cook in the oven. You do not want to do this one in a slow cooker because it will just destroy the shrimp. They'll be absolutely just inedible. There we go. All right, so the thinner these are, the faster they'll cook. So I recommend that you cut them pretty thin. Because the shrimp will cook fast. So you don't want your peppers to be too crunchy. You only want this to be in the oven for 10, 12 minutes at the most. It's cooking at a very high temperature, 450 degrees. This is a good recipe to serve over rice. You can do regular rice or cauliflower rice. Some people like it served as like in a corn shell tortilla style, like Mexican style tacos. We usually just have it by itself with a big salad when we make this recipe. So whatever style fits your preference. All right, we're halfway with our peppers. Almost done with these, and then we're going to move on to our onion. If you guys get a little bit ahead of me, totally okay, just keep going. And if I'm going too fast, let me know and I will slow it down. If you're watching this as a recording, you can just pause the recording and just come back, turn it back on when you get caught up. I do have a tendency to go a little bit fast with this stuff. Oops, sorry about that. I have so many alarms on my phone, I can't remember what half of them are for. All right, this is the last of the peppers. There we go. All right, switching to an onion now. So again, we're just going to slice these. So I'm going to cut this in half and then cut the ends off so that it peels easily. Okay. Or not so easily. This one does not want to come off. Oh, there we go. Wow, that was painful. Sorry, guys. All right, and then the other one here. All right, luckily this week's meal prep doesn't have as many veggies as some do, so it'll go a little quicker if I ever get my onions peeled. There we go. All right, so we're gonna do long slices through this one. Just go the length of your onion. Watch your fingers. Onions do tend to slide around a little bit. And again, you want them a little on the thinner side so they cook about the same pace as everything else. And you can use, back to the bell peppers, you can use any color bell pepper you want. I just had a whole bunch of green ones in my fridge, so that's what I went with. But this is a really pretty recipe if you use rainbow peppers. There we go. All right, so onion is done. We're going to toss that in. And then we are going to add a 1/4 cup of olive oil, which sounds like a lot, but because of all these veggies, with the shrimp, you want them to cook evenly. So we're going to add that 1/4 cup of olive oil. And then we're going to mince 2 cloves of garlic. I gotta find my garlic press here. So we're just going to crush these real quick so that they peel easily. All right, and then I gotta grab my garlic press. You can chop these with a knife if you prefer to chop these with a knife. I like the garlic press. Simple, quick. There we go. All right, then we are gonna add a teaspoon each of chili powder, cumin, and salt. So starting with the chili powder. And then the cumin. And if you want to add less than a teaspoon of salt, that's totally okay. It's up to you. Remember, you're cooking this to your family's liking. So if somebody in your family doesn't like a lot of salt, it's okie dokie. All right, then we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper. This recipe calls for both a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes and then 1/2 teaspoon of ground pepper. If you think that's a bit much for your family, then feel free to skip one or the other. teaspoon. All right. And then it calls for 1 lime juiced. And I'm actually going to zest the lime a little bit into the shrimp before I juice it, just to give it the flavor of the lime a little bit more of a pop. Where's my lime? Here we go. All right. So just, if you have a zester, you can do this. If you don't, this is not required part of this recipe. Just, I like the flavor that it adds. There we go. All right, so then we're going to cut it in half and juice it. And you can always quarter it and just squeeze the slices in. I'm using my little citrus press here. There we go. There's half. And then the other half. So like I said, definitely plan to bake this recipe on a sheet pan. Do not put this in a slow cooker. It'll destroy it. It's not worth it. It only takes a few minutes to cook. I guarantee you it will take your oven longer to preheat than this takes to cook. So, all right, so I'm gonna give this a good shake with the veggies first before I add the shrimp. There we go. So that way everything gets all mixed in. And then I'm just going to open up my bag. I just got a bag of raw medium shrimp. These ones are about 40 to 60 shrimp per pound. So just drop them right in there. And then I'm going to give it another shake. I have peeled with tail on. And deveined, obviously. I like them with the tail on. I feel like it adds a whole nother level of flavor. Plus, it's a little more fun for the kids when they're eating it. So give it another good shake. All right, and that recipe is done. Just press the air out of the bag and lay it flat. Nice and flat there. Squeeze all that air out. There we go. All right, we're gonna pop this in the freezer. All right, there we go. So 2 recipes down. We're moving on to number 3, the Italian shredded beef. Again, this is gonna go really fast. So open up your bag. And I have my beef in the fridge, so I'm just gonna go grab that real quick. So this recipe, 2 to 3 pounds is plenty. This is just shy of 2. Honestly, my kids don't eat that much, like I said before. So I'm not gonna make, my husband and I don't like eating leftovers every day for 2 weeks straight. So I try to go with the smaller sizes for my recipes. Okay, so now we need an onion. We're gonna again slice it just like we did the last one. So we're gonna cut it in half first. Whoops. Just rinse that off real quick. All right, and then a quick peel. Like I said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask me. And if you are watching the recording and you have questions, you can text me or email me, whatever works best for you. All right, so we're gonna do long slices again, just like we did with the chili shrimp. And we're gonna drop this right in on top of the beef. So traditionally, Italian shredded beef is obviously eaten on a crusty roll, you know, but this is just as good eaten by itself with a side salad or something like that. I know it's very non-traditional. My husband's from Chicago. He was horrified when I suggested that. So a tablespoon of olive oil. And then we're gonna add 8 ounces of pepperoncini peppers. So I have a 12-ounce jar here. I'm gonna chop these just a little bit. So I'm gonna go with about, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 peppers. 6, 7, 8, 9, and we'll go with 10. Okay. So cut the stems off because those are a little funky if you're doing these. And then just a couple of quick slices and drop them in. You don't have to cut the stems off if you don't want to, but they're a little funky when you're trying to shred it. Make sure you don't drain the brine out of the jar though, because we are going to add a little bit of that to our recipe. This one I definitely recommend that you put in a slow cooker if you want a really nice tender meat that it'll shred very easily. If you do this in the oven, it's kind of a pain. You have to watch it a lot more closely, and it still takes a pretty long time, like 3 or 4 hours, even in the oven. So you might as well just put it in a slow cooker. All right, there we go. So we got our peppers. Just gotta drop them in there. All right, so we're gonna add a 1/2 cup of beef broth. I have that measured out over here. And then we're gonna add a 1/2 cup of the brine from the pepperoncini peppers. Okay, and then we're gonna add a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. Rinse that juice off real quick. All right, so let me grab my Italian seasoning. So my Italian seasoning jar is pretty small. I can't fit my tablespoon measure in there, so I just use a teaspoon and do 3 teaspoons, which is the same amount. So 1, 2, and 3 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, and then a teaspoon of salt. All right, there we go, and that is it. So again, we're gonna give this a really good shake, and then we're gonna pop it in the freezer, and our 3rd recipe is already done. We are flying through this today. All right, so press the air out of there. But don't let the juice squeeze out. For a recipe like this with a cut of meat that you can't really flatten, I usually just fold the bag in half around it, and then it still fits pretty nicely. All right, so moving on. We're on to our honey balsamic chicken and veggies now. So I am going to switch out my cutting boards. Right, so grab your chicken. And again, you want it roughly 2 pounds, maybe a little less. And I am gonna slice these lengthwise, or a little differently from the last one. So I got 2 chicken breasts here. And again, probably want to use a plastic cutting board if you have one. Rather than a wooden cutting board for this recipe. Not want to fit. All right, so grab the knife, and again, just gonna cut these little funky pieces off where the fat is. Okay, so I am just going to slice these this way, each slice roughly ½ inch thick. And then I'm going to toss everything in the pan behind me. Obviously, if you're putting these in the freezer, you want to be putting them right into a bag. This is already our 4th recipe. We are flying tonight. All right, that one's got a lot of fat on it, so I'm going to cut some of that fat off. All right, and then the second one here. There we go. All right, so I'm going to toss these all in my pan. You want to obviously put them in your bag. And that can go in there. Rinse my egg. All right, so moving on to our chopped veggies now. You can use any kind of veggies you want for this one. I grabbed potato, pepper, garlic, carrots, and I might throw in an onion. Maybe not tonight. But yeah, basically whatever you prefer for this one. I'm just gonna rinse these potatoes real quick. You want your veggies to be relatively uniform so that they all cook at the same rate. So I'll cut these potatoes pretty thin, maybe just over 1/4 inch thick. And then same thing, cut the potato in half. And this one's a little bit smaller, so I'm not going to cut it, I'm not going to quarter it before I slice them. Oops. All right, so I'm going to toss these potatoes in with my chicken. And then moving on to the carrots. I have 2 carrots here, so I'm just going to cut the ends off. And just cut them into coins. Again, about the same thickness as the potatoes. I'm having a rough night. It's the things rolling away from me. There we go. All right, so there's the carrots, and then I'm going to do 1 pepper. I'm just going to peel the sticker off real quick. It doesn't want to come off for me. All right, and again, I'm going to just dice this into large chunks. What I'll probably do is just slice it lengthwise first and then cut them in half. So again, they'll cook at about the same rate as everything else in there. So much thicker than we did when we did the chili lime shrimp. This recipe, is good with asparagus, with cherry tomatoes, with onions. I mean, you can really get creative with this. Some squash, zucchini, basically any veggies that you want to put in this that'll all roast at roughly the same time. There's that. All right, so for the sauce ingredients, you're just going to pour it right all into your bag. I'm going to just pour everything. Actually, I'm going to mix everything first. Just because these are going right into the pan. I don't normally cook a recipe right as I'm making it like this, so it's kind of thrown off my groove here. All right, so 1/3 cup of balsamic vinegar. And like I said, you can be mixing these directly into your bag, and that's totally fine. I'm only doing it into a bowl because I'm cooking this recipe first. So we got 1/3 cup of balsamic. Then we're going to add 1/4 cup of honey. There we go. You might need a spoon or something to scrape the honey out when you're measuring it. All right, so we got that. And then we're going to add 1½ tablespoons of Dijon mustard. I'm just going to do a big squirt. Like that. And then we're going to add a teaspoon of garlic powder. All right, got a little bit of honey on my hands there. A whole teaspoon of garlic powder. Then we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric, which is kind of the secret ingredient in this recipe. You don't really taste it, but it's an epic superfood. So I highly recommend that you put this one in there. It's bright orange, the color of Kraft macaroni and cheese, but so good for you. All right, and then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of paprika. 1 and 2. And then, oh, that was only supposed to be 1. It's a heavy dose of paprika. So 1 teaspoon of paprika. I was looking at the wrong thing. All right, and then we're going to add salt and pepper. So I'm going to add about 1 teaspoon of salt for this one. There's lots of veggies in there that can use a little bit of flavor. And then 1/2 teaspoon or so black pepper and a little bit of basil. You can use fresh or dried basil. It's up to you. It does say fresh, but I have a whole bunch of dried basil that I picked from my garden this summer. So I'm going to use a teaspoon of that. All right, so then if you're doing this directly into your bag, just give your bag a good shake. I'm just going to stir this up real quick and then pour it over my veggies so that I can pop this in the oven when we're done here. There we go. Drizzle it all over. It is gorgeous. It's going to taste amazing. All right, so once you're done shaking up your honey balsamic chicken and veggies, then you're just going to toss that right into your freezer. And we'll be moving on to our pork next. All right, so last recipe. We're going to start with 6 pork chops in a bag. I already have mine in a bag in the fridge. We got our 6 pork chops. We're going to add 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I will measure this one because I'm not very good at eyeballing more than 1 tablespoon, believe it or not. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but 1, 2, 3. All right, and then we're going to add 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. You can use fresh or jarred. I actually have a jar of fresh that I squeezed myself last time I had a whole bunch of lemons. And I just squeezed them right into a regular bottle of lemon juice that I had sitting in there. So you want 4 tablespoons is 1/4 cup. Ooh, definitely a few seeds in there. There we go. All right, and then you're gonna add 4 cloves of garlic. So you wanna mince your garlic again. So again, quick way to peel them is to just press down on them so you hear crack them a little bit. And then the peel should come off fairly easily. fairly being the operative word there. There we go. All right, so you're gonna press your garlic right in to your bag. Again, we want to try to minimize dishes when we're doing this stuff. So the more you can mix right into your bag, the better. All right, there we go. Then we are going to add 1 cup of chopped basil, or a small handful of chopped basil. Got my basil over here. So again, we're just gonna do a quick chop. So mine's not quite a cup. My husband doesn't particularly love basil, so I'm going a little light on it. And then we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of salt. This recipe calls for 1.5 teaspoons of black pepper. I am definitely not adding that much. I will probably add less than 1 teaspoon just because my kids will never eat it if I put that much pepper in it. All right, and that is it. Give it a good shake and we are done. Time flies. Go. So shake it all up. Make sure that lemon juice and olive oil and basil and salt all get mixed together with the garlic. And then we're just going to press this out. Just make sure they're all kind of laying flat-ish, so then they'll freeze better. And there we go. We are done. Nice job, guys. Good timing tonight. If you have any questions about any of these recipes, like I said, call me, text me, email me, Facebook me, whatever form of communication you prefer. And I will do my best to answer them as fast as I can, all right? Other than that, we're all set. So you guys have a great night.